So I was born in a Christian home. I raised up, my dad was a Calvary Chapel pastor up in Santa Cruz, where I was born down here in Lancaster, and I was raised up there. So I grew up, knowing right from wrong, and I was a Christian basically because that's how I was raised, and I didn't really know why, or it wasn't my faith. It was more of my parents' faith. And so I went to church because that's how I was brought up. That's what I was taught. I went to camp every year. I was plugged into the junior high and high school ministry. I had the camp experience every year, and all that stuff that we've all probably gone through. And then, starting in junior high and high school, I wasn't really the best representation of Christ. I was the typical, jock and bully to everyone, and I wasn't really the nicest kid, and no one really knew. People knew that my dad was a pastor, but I didn't reflect Christianity whatsoever in my walk. And junior year of high school is when I started rebelling, I guess. I kind of went on a downward spiral. I got expelled halfway through my junior year of high school, and it was actually both my brothers and I on the same exact day. And yeah, so then, I got expelled for drinking, and I started doing coke and stuff like that, and right when that happened, all within the same couple weeks, I got expelled, and I lost. I was wanting to play football in college and stuff like that, and I pretty much lost any chances and opportunities of doing that because I got expelled. And in between that time is when my first nephew was born. He was born on February 6th, and his name is Titus. So his life verse is Titus 2:6, which says, "I exhort you young men to live sober-minded." And that's to this day, me and my family's verse, our life verse, because of the life that me and my brothers chose to live. So, like I said, I was unable to return to school, so I had to go to independent studies and stuff, and I couldn't play football, and I lost all that, so I kind of just gave up. And that summer is when my dad actually got sick, right before my senior year. So we had no man in the house. It was just my mom, and she would try and tell us what to do and stuff, but we were high school kids, and we didn't really want to listen to that, so we kind of rebelled. And my dad was gone for 9 months. He was in a coma and almost died, and so that led to me and, my brothers and stuff doing whatever we could to help forget about that and what he was going through. So that's where my drug addiction came in, and that's where it took me. And then right after that, so the beginning of my senior year, I went to a public school, which for me was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I went to a Christian school my entire life, from kindergarten through junior year of high school, and I knew that stuff was there, and I was never really introduced to it so much, other than hanging out with my friends and my brothers and stuff. But when I came to school and saw that, it was a lot different for me. So, I was surrounded by and influenced by nothing but the world. There was no Christians on campus. There was no accountability. There was none of that. It was just partying, girls, whatever, everything you can imagine is, pretty much everyone here went to a public school probably. So because I was the new guy there, I didn't really have to look for anything. Everything came to me as far as parties and all that stuff. And so the enemy just kind of threw it all at me, and I took it in, I guess. So I did it. I started living that lifestyle at first to deal with the sickness of my dad and help me forget about what he was going through, and kind of use that temporary high to kind of, tweak my mind so I wouldn't have to realize it. But that's just where it started. And even when he got better, it still kept, I still kept leading down that road. And, I started doing coke at school and stuff like that. And I started doing it with more and more people, and I started hanging out with the wrong kids, and introducing more of my friends who had never done anything. I basically introduced them to it and stuff, and so I started going down that path again, and I started hanging out with my brothers more and their friends instead of the church kids and the youth group. And I would go because my dad made me, and he was the pastor, so I had to go there, and everyone knew me as the pastor's son, and they thought I was all good and stuff like that, but they didn't. I hid it very well. No one knew the lifestyle that I was living. So like I said, I started hanging out with the wrong kids, and my dad tells me this to this day is 1 Corinthians 15:33 says that bad company corrupts good morals. So, we become like who we hang out with, and I was hanging out with all the partiers and all the druggies and stuff, and that's who I became. That's the life that I was living. So, and before I knew it, halfway through my senior year, I was introduced to meth and heroin, and before I knew it, I was doing whatever I could to get any sort of high, whatever it was thrown at me, I would do it, and I didn't really care how it affected me or what it did to my body or what people knew. And essentially that led me to think of how I could, get more money to buy more drugs and stuff. And halfway or right before I graduated high school, I got arrested for first-degree burglary, and it was right after I turned 18. So, I to this day I still have a record, and it's hard for me to get a job. And I think about it as far as how I have to provide for my future family and stuff, and how I wasn't thinking, and I was 18, I was a stupid kid, but essentially it's going to follow me for the rest of my life. And that's when things got worse. I kind of had given up on life because, the football was gone. Now this, I graduated high school barely, but I still had this. And so drugs became, a bigger and bigger problem each day with me. I barely graduated high school. My graduation present was my dad posting bail for me to get out of jail and to be able to graduate high school and walk. Like I said, the drug use continued. Grad night was the last time I saw most of my classmates, and I was blacked out because of too much Xanax and ecstasy, and I just don't even remember. And that's the last picture that most people saw of me, which is kind of sad. But I lived in a small town, and everyone knew my dad was a pastor, so they knew that, when this happened, our whole reputation as a family got ruined, and people were bashing my dad and my mom on the website, saying, how can you be a pastor? Your kids are screwing up. Your kids are doing this and that, and you call yourself a pastor and hypocrite and all this stuff. And they were blaming him for the stuff that I did. And it really kind of, it tore me up. And but like I said, after graduation, I completely fell off the map. I lost all sense of conviction. My heart was callous towards the Lord. I didn't care what he had to say or what he was telling me, and I just wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. So that's, shortly after that, that's when I became addicted to, meth and heroin, and I was just doing it whenever I could. And in between that, I was still going to court with the case that I'd been arrested for, and the judge had guaranteed me no state prison if I hadn't got arrested again. But, that didn't really, it should have, but it didn't really phase the lifestyle that I was living. And I was stealing every time I went in a store. I got multiple times where I should have died because, I was hanging out with the wrong people, and I almost got caught with drugs multiple times, which would have, sent me to prison and stuff. And eventually, they sentenced me to a year, so that's 8 months. And then I was doing really good in jail. My mindset was, when I go to jail, I'm going to get sober, get right with the Lord. And I did. The first 6 months, I was going to Bible study every week. I was growing in my walk. People were making fun of me because I was a Bible thumper, and I didn't really care, and it didn't really faze me at all. But then right towards the end, I knew I was getting out, and I had that mentality of I'm getting out, I can do whatever I want. So I started smoking weed in jail, and that's a gateway that led me to going back to the other stuff. And I was at a minimum security, so I got to drive to school and back, and I started bringing drugs back into the jail and selling them to people. And so right then and there, right before I got out, that lifestyle started up. I stopped going to Bible study, I stopped reading my Bible. I was just ready to get back out and do whatever I had to do. And I knew that my parents were moving down here 3 months after I got out, so I knew when I got out I could do whatever I want and hang out until I came down here. And even while I was in there, I still didn't get caught, and I felt as if the Lord gave me too much grace. There's so many times where I should have been dead or caught because of the stuff I did, and the Lord just kept showing me grace. The day I got out, I was already drinking and doing drugs again. My parents, like I said, they moved down here to get us away from Santa Cruz and those kids that we were hanging out with, which is, it's ultimately the best decision that we've ever made as a family. And I'm glad that they did that, or else I don't know where I'd be. So I was doing work release up there, living in my car with my older brother, doing everything that we could, just, every dollar we had, it obviously went to drugs. And, and then I moved down here, and I started, I was good for a little bit, and then even down here, I met some people and started dabbling in the drugs again down here, and driving down to LA and whatnot, and so then I got sick of it, and I knew that I wanted to change. I knew that the Lord wanted me to stop, but I still wasn't ready to give that up completely. So last April, I went up to Santa Cruz, and I snuck up there on a Greyhound. My parents didn't know I was up there. They thought I was down visiting someone in LA. I went to this big rave, did all this, yada, yada, yada. And then on the way back down on the Greyhound is when I started getting super depressed, and because, all the drugs I did, and I was like, what should I do? My dad's like, go to Teen Challenge or Bible college. And that's ultimately how I ended up in Bible college. If you don't know, I'm in Bible college in Santa Barbara. I'm home on summer break. But, I've gone as far as wanting to essentially end my life because I was done with that depression. I didn't know what to do. I just wanted it to go away, and I knew that I could, follow the Lord and stuff, but I was like, it can't be that easy. It's going to take some time. I don't want to have to wait. I don't want to do all that. So, I started to look more and more and doing Bible college, but then in that time, I was like, hey, I'll think about it. I put it on the side, and then I got arrested again last May for drugs, again, down here. And, by the grace of God, I only had to do 2 weeks of that, or 2 weeks in jail because of that. And the Lord definitely showed me grace on that, and I could have been put away for a little bit longer. But growing up, I always felt that I was saved because I said the sinner's prayer so many different times. Growing up in the church, every time there was an altar call, I did it just because I could get that get out of free card and go to heaven essentially. But none of it changed my lifestyle. I lived on cheap grace, just living my life, wanting to have fun at the time and just get right with the Lord when I'm older, and knowing that I'll go to heaven because like I said, I got my get out of hell free card, but my life never changed. Over time, I became broken over the life that I was living, and I knew that the Lord had a plan for me, and this obviously wasn't it. He moved me down here to get away from all that, and it finally took, 9 or 10 months for me to catch that and realize that, all right, I'm done. That's my old life. I've got to put that away and stuff. And then I moved to, I went to Bible college in August, and that's when I rededicated my life to the Lord. I'm 10 and a half months sober now, so it's been quite some time. And I feel as going to Bible college and growing in my walk, I've been starting to trying to figure out what it is that God's calling me to do. And like I said, my dad just started a church, so eventually I want to do the junior high age ministry and stuff like that, and help young kids not to follow the lifestyle that I lived. That the enemy is just kind of, sneaking into their head and telling them how great this stuff is when it's really not. And one of my favorite verses is 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says that if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have been made new. And that's one of the things that I really cling to, is just knowing that my past doesn't describe who I am, but who I was before I was walking with the Lord, and when I was living that life alienated from Christ. Satan tries to remind us of our past while Jesus points us to our future. So that's one of the big things that someone told me that, and I try and cling to that as well, just knowing that, not to kind of trip on stuff that I've done in the past, just knowing that, the Lord's forgiven me and He delights in forgiving us, and I'm past that. But since giving my life back to the Lord, I finally have joy again and peace, and I feel like I have a purpose, like I have a reason to be here, and the Lord's calling me to something. I don't have to look over my shoulder all the time for cops and whatnot, and so I'm not perfect or anywhere near it. We all have struggles and we all sin, and but I know that right now drugs is not one of them. But at the same time, when one addiction gets thrown away, the enemy's going to throw something else at you that you never thought it would be. So he seeks to kill, steal, and destroy us, and he won't ever stop. We got to be steadfast in our walk with Christ, constantly growing and standing firm, not allowing any of the temptations to come through. 1 Corinthians 10:13 talks about, when we're tempted, that the Lord always makes a way of escape. So whatever sin is in your life, if it's not drugs, whatever it is, that we always have that way of escape, whether it's reading the Bible, calling up a Christian friend, whatever it is, just to escape from that. So like I said before, I'm blessed to know that my past doesn't describe who I am, but who I was before I was living my life with Christ. So, you can take a million steps away from God, but He's only one step back. So, to this day, the Lord continues to work in my life and my brothers, and my older brother's down in rehab, about to, he's get back. But for the first time in like 5 years, we all have our lives on track, and we're all making that decision to walk with the Lord, and that's essentially, it's our past now. So, He's forgiven me, and He's forgiven us of all the stuff that we've done, and He just wants us to press onward in that calling that He has in our life. So, yeah.